Hello, and welcome to the Channel of Stories. Dear listeners, before we start the story, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a like and share in the comments where you are from. Thank you. Here we go.
She wore white the day she married my brother, and I smiled like I was happy for them, even though every part of me was screaming her name inside my chest. I came to London for just one summer. I was 24, broke, pretending to write a novel and sleeping on my brother's couch. And then there was her, Sofia. The way she looked at the world was like everything had poetry in it, even the broken things. She was studying architecture, spoke 4 languages, and had that kind of laugh that makes you jealous of whoever caused it. She was his girlfriend. I knew it, but the way she looked at me when no one else was watching, like she was wondering if we were in the wrong story. I tried to stay away. I even left for Paris for a week just to breathe. But when I came back, she hugged me like I was someone she missed in silence. And one night, after too much wine and a storm that soaked the entire city, she said, "If I met you first, everything would be different." We kissed, in the kitchen, with the rain pounding the windows and her hands tangled in my hair like she was trying to forget everything else. It lasted 12 seconds, maybe less, and then she pulled away. She didn't cry. She just whispered, "This never happened." The next morning, she left town for 2 weeks. When she came back, she had a ring on her finger. I didn't go to the wedding. I told my brother I was sick, but I saw the photos, and I saw the way she avoided looking into the camera. Like even on the happiest day of her life, she couldn't lie completely. Now I live in Prague. I write. I walk a lot. Sometimes she emails me. Just short things. Saw a book you'd love. This cafe reminded me of that night. We never talk about that kiss. But in some parallel life, we are honest just once. And I don't miss her every time it rains. I think some people are meant to touch your life, just not keep it. She wore white the day she married my brother. A cathedral in South Kensington. Arches like ribs. Music echoing off stone walls, soft as breath. I sat in the 3rd row, second from the aisle, close enough to see her blink too often, not enough to be noticed. She walked slowly, not dramatically, not like a movie, but with a kind of grace that made time stutter. Her dress was simple, no lace, no train, just white silk and bare shoulders that used to brush against mine in the hallway, too casually to mean anything, too often not to. I clapped when everyone else clapped, laughed at the right moments, smiled for the cameras that panned over rows of grinning faces. But behind my smile, my mouth was dry, my chest tight. I wanted to scream, but you don't scream at weddings. You sip champagne and nod at relatives who don't remember your name. You pretend to be grateful for the salmon and roasted vegetables. You give a short speech if asked, always neutral, always light. You watch her from across the room as she moves like a melody, her hand trailing along my brother's arm like a ribbon in wind. No one knew I had loved her. That I still did. We met one ordinary afternoon that became extraordinary the second she looked at me like I was someone worth reading cover to cover. She was visiting from Barcelona, finishing her thesis on modular public housing. Her bag was filled with fountain pens and dog-eared notebooks. I was jet-lagged and broke, living on my brother's couch, pretending to be a writer. She saw right through me, but she didn't look away. That summer was a string of almosts. Shared glances, inside jokes, our knees brushing under cafe tables, me walking slower just to stay in step with her, her waiting at the kitchen counter with 2 mugs of tea, one of which she never drank. I didn't tell my brother. I didn't tell anyone. Because what do you do when the woman you can't stop thinking about is dating your brother? You swallow it. You leave the room early. You go to Paris and pretend it's for research when really, it's just so you can forget the shape of her voice when she says your name. And then you come back, and she hugs you like someone exhaling. And you know she feels it too. But now she's married. To him. And I'm applauding like the proud younger brother, camera ready, dead quiet inside. Because she wore white the day she married my brother. And I will never forget the way her eyes searched the room once, briefly, and didn't land on me. I met her on a Tuesday, jet-lagged, caffeine-deprived, and irritable from the cheapest red-eye London had to offer. My brother had left me a note. "There's tea in the cupboard. Try not to burn down the place." I stumbled into the kitchen in sweatpants, yawning when she turned around holding a cup. "Oh," she said, "you must be Theo." Her voice had a rhythm I wasn't prepared for. Light, but deliberate. Her dark hair was piled into a messy knot, and she was barefoot, holding the mug like it was something sacred. I mumbled something awkward, reached for a cup, knocked hers over. It smashed. The tea splashed down the cabinet door and pooled on the floor between us. I dropped to my knees, apologizing, reaching for paper towels. She laughed. Not at me, not mockingly, but like something had cracked open and all this light was pouring out. I glanced up, startled. Her eyes were still laughing. "Don't worry," she said. It wasn't a favorite. She offered me her hand. I took it. She didn't let go right away. That was the first time. The first moment I felt it. The question, unspoken, but pulsing between us like a quiet bass line. The kind of question you only ask in silence. Over the next few days, I told myself I was imagining it. She was my brother's girlfriend. Smart, confident, the kind of woman who filled a room without trying. She had opinions about cathedral acoustics and a habit of sketching things on receipts. She and my brother had been dating for 6 months, long enough for her to leave a toothbrush in his bathroom and stacks of architecture magazines on his coffee table. We all went out together, pubs, exhibitions, parks, and every time she laughed, I caught myself watching her too long. She noticed. Sometimes, when he wasn't looking, she looked at me with this stillness, like she was trying to place me in a memory we hadn't made yet. I started avoiding the apartment, staying out late, pretending I had deadlines. But every time I came back and found her on the couch, sketching with her headphones on, my heart tightened in ways I didn't have words for. Once, late at night, we crossed paths in the hallway. "You should write," she said. "I'm trying," I replied. She smiled. "Try louder," and kept walking. That's how it started. Not with a declaration, not with a spark, but with a glance that lasted a second too long and ruined me, quietly, permanently. I left for Paris the following week. I said it was for research, some vague excuse about libraries and literary ambience, which sounded just believable enough to pass. But the truth? I had to get out. The apartment was too small. Her laughter too loud in my memory. Every morning started with her brushing her teeth in a t-shirt that wasn't mine, and every night ended with me pretending not to hear them talking softly behind the closed bedroom door. So I booked a one-way train and left before sunrise. Paris was colder than I expected for late July. I stayed in a cheap flat in the 11th arrondissement above a wine bar with sticky floors and creaky stairs. My writing didn't go anywhere. I opened a blank document every day and stared at the cursor like it owed me answers. Instead of pages, I filled a notebook with pieces of her. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking. How she pronounced structure, like it had 3 syllables. The way her face looked different when she was listening to music, softer, unguarded, like she was somewhere only she could see. I tried to erase her by writing her. It didn't work. I walked a lot, through the Marais, along the Seine, into bookstores I couldn't afford and cafes where I drank bitter espresso while listening to people fall in and out of love in rapid French. She sent one message while I was gone. No greeting, just a photo of a brick archway, one of those rare curved relics tucked behind a museum courtyard. She captioned it, "Reminds me of that poem you read out loud the other night." That was it, but it unraveled me, because she'd remembered. And not just the poem, the moment. That night we sat on the floor while my brother was asleep, drinking wine and talking about how some architecture is just accidental poetry. I'd pulled out a wrinkled page of something unfinished and read it aloud, thinking she wouldn't care. But she did. And now, days later and hundreds of miles away, she was reminding me she hadn't forgotten. When I came back to London, she was already at the apartment. She turned when she heard the door, and she smiled, not polite, not distant, not like someone greeting her boyfriend's brother, but like someone who'd been holding their breath. She hugged me like it meant something, and I let it, because even in the distance, even in the silence, we had never really left the room. The rain came suddenly. It had been a clear afternoon, muggy, lazy, the kind of London day that tricks you into thinking you don't need an umbrella. But by nightfall, the sky had split open, and water poured down like it had something to prove. My brother was working late. Some last-minute client dinner. I came home to the smell of something herbal on the stove and Sofia in the kitchen, barefoot, humming an unfamiliar tune. "I made soup," she said, without looking up. "It's terrible, but it's warm." We ate in silence, knees touching under the kitchen table, both of us pretending not to notice. The lights flickered once, then again, and then darkness. Complete. She laughed. Perfect timing. I lit a candle, then another. The room softened into amber. We stayed at the table, drinking wine and playing that game where you ask each other questions you're not supposed to. Favorite childhood smell? Biggest regret? What's something you wish you had the courage to say? She looked at me for a long time after that one. "I think," she said slowly, "I would tell someone I wasn't sure I was in the right story." I didn't breathe. Outside, thunder rolled like distant applause. I said, "Tell them." Her eyes met mine, clear, scared, certain. "If I met you first," she whispered, "everything would be different." And I kissed her. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't explosive. It was surrender. 12 seconds of quiet, forbidden surrender. Her hands tangled in my hair. My thumb grazed her jaw. Rain pounded the windows. Her breath hitched in my chest. When she pulled back, she didn't cry. She just looked at me like she already missed me. "This never happened," she said softly. And I nodded, even though I wanted to beg her not to go. Even though I already knew what would happen next. She left the next morning. She didn't leave a note. Didn't text. Just vanished into 2 weeks of silence and clean breaks. I watched the rain fall that morning from the same kitchen chair. I replayed every frame of that kiss in my head. And I knew, no matter what came next, I would carry those 12 seconds forever. She disappeared without ceremony. No goodbye. No explanation. No, this was a mistake, or let's forget it ever happened. Just silence. She left a sweater draped over the couch, her teacup still in the sink, a single line of handwriting on the calendar pinned near the door. Meeting, 11 a.m. Nothing else. I woke up to an empty apartment. My brother thought she'd gone to visit her cousin in Kent. She'd mentioned it weeks ago, he said. I nodded like it made sense. Like my stomach wasn't twisted into a knot I couldn't explain. Those 2 weeks were a study in restraint. I didn't message her. I didn't stalk her socials. I didn't ask questions I already knew I couldn't bear the answers to. Instead, I stayed busy, whatever that meant. Long walks, blank pages, half-hearted attempts to act normal when my brother tossed a beer at me and asked if I'd met anyone interesting lately. The worst part? He was happy, oblivious, totally unaware that his brother had kissed his girlfriend in the kitchen during a thunderstorm. When she came back, everything had changed. She wore a different energy, composed, distant, like she'd stitch herself back together while she was gone. She had a new coat, a sharper tone. Her laugh was softer, measured, and on her finger, the ring. A delicate band, gold, subtle, the kind that says I said yes without screaming it. He was glowing. Said he proposed over dinner in some little French bistro in Brighton. Said she cried. Said she said yes before he even finished the question. I nodded, congratulated them, said all the right things while my world tilted sideways. Later that night, she caught me alone in the hallway. She didn't say anything, just looked at me. And for a moment, just a flicker, her hand twitched like she wanted to reach for me. But she didn't. She looked away first. And that's when I knew she had chosen. It wasn't a rejection. It was survival. Because love isn't always about who you want most. Sometimes it's about who you can live with and who you can't live as. And she couldn't live as the girl who kissed her fiancé's brother and ran. So she came back with a ring. In a silence I've never been able to unhear. I didn't go to the wedding. Told my brother I was sick. Flu or food poisoning. I can't remember which lie I settled on. He offered to reschedule my flight back home so I wouldn't miss it. I told him no, not to worry. He didn't push. That was always his way. The morning of the ceremony, I sat alone in the flat. The silence was dense. I scrolled through news articles and leftover emails, anything to avoid thinking about what was happening 30 minutes across the city. She would be walking down the aisle. White silk, pale flowers, saying yes to a life I should have never been part of. When the photos went online later that week, I stared at them for hours. Not out of obsession, or maybe it was. I wanted to see her. I wanted proof of her choice. Proof that I'd imagined it all. That I'd invented the glances, the silence, the storm. In the photos, she looked beautiful. Radiant even, but not complete. There was one photo, in particular, a candid, slightly out of focus. She's stepping out of the car, bouquet in hand. My brother is looking at her with the kind of awe that makes you root for him. But she's not looking back. Her eyes are turned slightly away, toward something out of frame, toward nothing at all. And in that small moment, the mask slips. Her mouth is tight, her shoulders stiff. Like even on the happiest day of her life, she couldn't lie completely. There was another photo, at the reception. They're dancing. He's smiling, head tilted, clearly laughing at something someone shouted nearby. She's looking down, like she's counting her steps, like she's anywhere but there. I closed the laptop and sat with my head in my hands. That was the last time I saw her face for a long time. She vanished again, but this time into a new role: wife, partner, future architect of someone else's life. And me? I booked a one-way ticket to Prague. No goodbye. No explanations. I left my brother a note on the fridge. Thank you. Good luck. I'll call. I didn't call. Some things are too big for words. Prague became a kind of exile. Not punishment. Not quite. More like quiet. I rented a flat in Zizkov. High ceilings, creaky floors, a view of the city that always looked like it had just finished weeping. The kind of place where ghosts feel welcome. Where silence isn't emptiness, it's permission. I started writing again. Not the novel I promised myself in London. Not the one that followed me to Paris and wilted there. Instead, I wrote fragments. Half scenes. Vignettes of lives I'd never live. Strangers who kissed at train stations and left messages in borrowed books. People who chose the wrong thing and had to live with the beauty and the ache of that choice. Every morning, I walked to a tiny cafe that served bitter coffee and ignored tourists. I sat by the window, filled a notebook, watched people move like water around each other. And sometimes, maybe once a month, she emailed me. Nothing dramatic. A picture of a building under construction. You'd love the geometry. A quote from a poem we both liked. I wanted it to be you. I wanted it to be you so badly. Once just still think about the storm sometimes. I never responded. Not because I didn't want to, because I couldn't figure out how to say everything without breaking something else. And maybe silence was the only way to protect what little we hadn't already ruined. I thought about her most when it rained. Prague rain is different. Softer, maybe less violent than London. But it still carries the same weight, the same memory. Every drop a quiet reminder of hands tangled in hair, of words whispered like prayers before they're taken back. Once I walked into a bookstore and saw a woman from behind, dark hair twisted up, one hand tracing the spine of a poetry collection. My heart dropped. It wasn't her. Of course it wasn't. But I stood there anyway, just for a minute, pretending. Because here's the thing they don't tell you. When you lose someone you never really had, you still grieve them like they died. Every day in Prague, I let her go a little more. But I never stopped writing her into things. A smile in a passing crowd. A line in a short story. A character who builds houses but never lives in any of them. She was never really mine. But she lives in the ink. And in the rain. Always in the rain. There are words we never said that still live in my chest. They rattle sometimes, late at night, or when I walk past couples laughing too easily. I think about how close we came. How terrifyingly close. If I had reached for her again. If she hadn't pulled away. If we had stayed in that kitchen just 5 more seconds. But life is built on almost. I've come to believe that. Almost kissed again. Almost called her. Almost sent her a letter I wrote by hand and folded 6 times before burning it in the sink. Almost. I saw her name once on a magazine feature about young architects shaping London. There was a photo, Sofia standing in front of a model, explaining her work to someone just out of frame. Her hair was shorter, her face softer. She looked real, not like a memory, not like a ghost, like someone who moved on. And yet, that night, I dreamed of her again. We were back in the kitchen. The rain, the wine, the candlelight. But in the dream, she didn't say this never happened. In the dream, she said, "Take me with you." And I did. I woke up disoriented, angry at myself for still dreaming, still hoping. still inventing a version of us that could never exist in daylight. But here's the truth. Some people make you feel like the world paused for them. And that pause doesn't disappear. It lives in you, becomes part of your rhythm, part of how you measure everything that comes after. The girl I loved before her, I barely remember her laugh. The one I tried to love after, she told me once she felt like I only existed halfway. She wasn't wrong. I've tried to be whole since. Tried to put her down gently in the place in my mind where what-ifs go to sleep. But some nights, I still wonder what we'd be if we were honest just once. And other nights, I remind myself, honesty doesn't erase timing, or promises, or rings. So we stay almost, and I carry the weight of what never was like a story I can't finish. Not because it's unwritten, but because it was always meant to end where it did. 12 seconds, and a lifetime of almost. I write her letters sometimes, late at night, after too much wine, or on the kind of rainy afternoon that makes Prague feel like a dream someone else is having. I write without thinking. No drafts, no edits, just ink bleeding across the page. Letters I never send. I tell her about the book I'm trying to finish, about the old woman who feeds pigeons outside my window, about a painting I saw that looked like her if she were made of shadow and glass. I ask her questions. Do you remember the poem on the receipt? Do you still drink chamomile when you can't sleep? Do you ever walk into a room and forget what part of your life you're supposed to be in? Sometimes I tell her I forgive her. Other times, I ask if she forgives me. But mostly I just write, because it's easier than silence, and safer than truth. I fold the letters and hide them in a box under my bed, labeled nothing, just wood and metal and a key I keep on a ribbon around my neck like a secret I've learned to live with. Once I dreamt she found them. In the dream, she opened the box, read them all, and didn't cry. She just turned to me and said, "You always were better with words than with moments." I didn't respond, because she was right. I was always better at building her in metaphors than in memory. But even ghosts need a place to haunt. And these letters, these ink-drenched echoes, are hers. She wrote me once more, a year after the wedding. Found one of your poems in a book I borrowed, the one about the streetlight. I always like how you ended it. That line about silence having a shape. I still think of it when it rains. No signature, no address, just that. And I carried it like a matchstick in my chest. That's what we are now. Ghost notes in old books. Flickers of a story that ended before it began. And still I write, not to get her back, but to keep the part of me that belonged to her from fading. It's been years. I've built a life here, bookshelves full, windowsill herbs, a routine soft enough to disappear into. My apartment smells like coffee and dust. I've stopped checking my inbox for her name. But every now and then, when the light hits the pavement just right, or someone says her name by accident, I feel it, the pulse, the echo of a moment that never got its future. I saw her once, from a distance, near Charles Bridge. She was with a man I didn't recognize, holding a little girl's hand, laughing. It didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like closure wearing someone else's face. I turned away before she saw me, walked the long way home, didn't write about it. Didn't drink that night, just sat, and let myself feel what I'd been avoiding for years. We were never meant to be a story with a middle and an end. We were the preface, the line you underline in the first chapter that tells you how everything will go, even if you don't understand it yet. I think some people aren't meant to stay. Some loves are scaffolding. They hold you up long enough to build something stronger, quieter, realer. Sofia was scaffolding in sunlight. She was the question I never answered, the silence I never filled. And now, she's a woman I once kissed during a storm. A woman I once loved in a way that was both too much and not enough. I still keep a box, still wear the key, not because I'm waiting, but because some truths don't need to be shouted. They just need to be carried. She was my brother's wife. She is someone else's now, and I'm still here, writing, walking, letting the aches soften year by year into something almost tender. If we were honest just once, maybe everything would have been different. But maybe it was that one moment of honesty, that 12-second kiss in the rain, that gave us everything we ever could have had. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough.